Guys, what's up?
What's up, everybody?
We're back.
We're back.
We are back.
4 months. We're back.
We're back, guys. What is up? Welcome back to another episode of Think Different Theory. I'm going to claim this one as episode of Think
And
Different
I'll
Theory.
probably also use it on the Marketing Secrets podcast. We'll use it for both.
We'll use it for, that's perfect. A dual episode. Guys, we are back. We were supposed to do this last week, but Russell
Circumstances do not allow it.
Yeah, Russell's in a bad mood, so we have to do this. But guys, welcome back. Today, I'm really, really excited because we are discussing
one of my new favorite books.
One of your new favorite books, Outwitting the Devil, which you recommended to everybody, the whole world, what, like 3 months ago, 4 months ago, something like that?
Yeah, I'm shocked how many people have read it. If you haven't yet, go buy it on Amazon. There's two versions.
I got to share this.
Real quick. He'll share that while I'll tell you guys about this. So,
Perfect.
There's two versions of it. This one's got Sharon Lecter's notes. This one doesn't. I'd get one of Sharon Lecter's notes. And I can talk to the camera here. Hey, what's up, camera? And also, if you look at the audiobook, it's awesome because in the audiobook, you can actually hear the two voices, and one voice is the devil, one's Napoleon Hill, and it's amazing. Should I tell the story about the books?
Well, okay, so actually, I want to do that. I actually want to do this because how I wanted to open this up is like, I want to take it back, like kind of take a step back because like, you've built ClickFunnels, and now I feel like you've gone in kind of this new stage. You start reading a bunch of books, and then you like geek out on Atlas Shrugged, and then you like geek out on the next thing. And now we're at this book. So like, back us up. When, where, like, how did you find this book? Where did it come about? Okay. And then let's dive into it because I feel like context is important.
Yeah. So, man, a lot of things. So obviously, those who've read any of my books, I feel like I'm done. Like I wrote all the marketing books. Like I'm out of secrets. That's it. The trilogy's done. The work is finished. It's over.
Guys, we're done with Russell forever.
But I was like, but then for me, it's like, I don't know. I think in any area of life, there's a point where you feel like you get mastery, and it's like it gets harder and harder to find the new things. So like, there's always incremental things, but it's like there's not like a whole bunch of new stuff I'm like can discover and like, oh my gosh, like freak out.
Right,
you know?
Something about marketing you've never seen before.
Yeah, so
right.
It's harder, and so for me, it's like I'm a learner. I'm always pursuing education and ideas and like things, and so I started just kind of re-geeking out on personal development stuff.
Yeah.
Because I miss it. I'm trying to think about things in my life. And so I was going through a bunch of different things and rereading a bunch of books I read back, a decade ago, like Think and Grow Rich, which, by the way, that's kind of, this is the first edition printing of Think and Grow Rich. Josh knows this, I'm kind of a geek with old books. You guys will see why more in about 18 months from now. We're doing some really cool things. But
so cool.
But this is the first edition of Think and Grow Rich. So Think and Grow Rich was written by Napoleon Hill in 1937. It's like the most... outside of the Bible, it's like the highest personal development book ever sold.
The number one, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really good. And so I was reading that again, and then people kept telling me about this other book. And there's a lot of books. So this is like right here. This is Think or This is the Laws of Success, which right now I'm trying to acquire a first edition Laws of Success, which is, I was telling you, it's insane.
It's crazy expensive, but Russell's over here like geeking out on all the books.
I love old books.
Actually, side note on that, guys. The very first time, so this is back at I think it was the first or second Offer, I can't remember, Mind, the big one, Offer Mind. You had spoke at it, and you were coming off stage, and I walked out, it was you and Dave, and I like ran up to you as you were getting on the elevator. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do.
And I was like, Russell, and I didn't know you like hardly at all this time. Like we kind of knew, like we knew basically, like we had some interactions. I was like, I'm trying to dream 100 you. What's a good gift? And you're like, old books. Ding! The elevator door shuts. Like you're on the elevator, I'm off the elevator. And I was like, all right, that's all I have to go on.
And you sent me some amazing old books.
Yeah.
So very, very cool.
Yeah.
And so I just, again, I'm kind of going back through and I'm relearning from Tony again and from other people and stuff like that. But then this book keeps coming up, and for some reason the title didn't grab me. I was like, Outwitting the Devil. It sounds stupid. I didn't want to read it. It never even crossed my mind as like a book I was going to read. It's not something that I would really care about. And then one day, and I'm on Audible. I download almost all the books I buy, physical copies.
Yeah, 100%.
I do an Audible too, just in case. Yep. And I'm one of those kind of people that when I'm in a mood for something, that's why when I travel, it drives my wife crazy. I'll bring a backpack with like 40 books. I don't know what mood I'm going to be in. And she's like, why don't you just bring a Kindle? I'm like, because I like paper and I want to be able to hold it and see where the bookmark's at.
Yeah.
And same thing's true in Audible. So I just download all of an Audible just in case. And so one day I was working out. I was trying, anyway, this is a longer story, but I was trying to buy success.com at the time. It ended up falling through. I didn't get it. But Napoleon Hill was actually one of the original. He wrote for Success in 1980. In fact, this is kind of cool.
This is cool.
Napoleon Hill's. He started a magazine. He actually talks about it in Outwitting the Devil. So he started a magazine called Hill's Golden Rule. This is one of the original. This one's from 1919. But anyway, he was also an author in the original Success magazines back in the 1800s. I have a whole bunch of copies actually. 1800s and Napoleon Hill's articles in Success.
Dang, that's like, so cool. Oh my gosh.
So I just got some of these things, and then one morning I was working out and I was looking at my playlist, and Outwitting the Devil popped up, and for some reason I was like, all right. So I clicked it, and it started talking about this magazine, or talked about Hill's Golden Rule, and talked about Success magazine, which I was trying to acquire at the time, and all these things. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so at the very beginning, he tells the story. He's kind of telling the story. I didn't really know where I was going to go. He's telling the story about his life. And then all of a sudden it transitions to this conversation he's having with the devil. And as you know, you've read it.
It's so
It's
good.
just like, I started getting to him like, oh my gosh. Like, why didn't nobody tell me about this before? This is, to put in perspective, I've read a lot of personal development books. I love Think and Grow Rich. This is so much better than Think and Grow Rich.
It is. I agree with that.
And do you want me to tell the story behind it? Do you want to tell her what's the...
behind
just where, how, like what the book is, where it came from. There's like amazing story.
I think I actually want to pass it over to you because I have questions about it. So I want to kind of hear things from your perspective here on this. Things I think a lot of people do as well. It's funny though, because when you put this on, like I kind of picked up reading like halfway through last year. Like I made a public declaration when I graduated from high school. I bought a pickup truck.
I don't read anymore.
And I put down the tailgate. I got up there. I stood up. I held my arms in the air. And I literally yelled audibly out loud, I will never read another book ever again outside of the Bible. Like literally, I was so done with reading. My mom made us do all this reading in high school, right? I was like, I'm so done. And thankfully, that's not the case.
It reminds me of? I got done wrestling my senior year in college. And after my last match, I publicly said, I will never run again. And I gained 60 pounds. Now I run.
And now you run. Yeah.
Anyway, we had a similar experience.
Yeah.
So like,
so
I'll never do that again.
But like 6 months or so, like 6 months into last year, I start like picking up reading more or whatever. And like, actually I've been averaging 3 books a month this year, which is freaking awesome. But I'm in the middle, like I'm halfway through. I can't remember what book it was. And I see on your Instagram story and you're like, everybody read this book.
Holy cow. Every chapter was like, oh my gosh. Like,
right. So I immediately go and, buy it. And as soon as I finish the next book, I like read the whole thing. And I think I read it in like 2 sittings, right? Like the whole thing. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. So I want you to kind of break it down for those people out there that don't know what it is. It is a story of Napoleon Hill interviewing the devil, essentially. So I have a lot of questions just after you kind of explain the context of it all, but why don't you just kind of give people some context around what it is?
And then, by the way, I spent the last little while like trying to take the entire book and put it into a framework like I do. So that's what this is back here. We'll talk about this and some of the things
we have this here too
that hopefully become serve as a framework for you guys. If you decide to read, like here's some stuff to help. But okay, so here's the story. So Think and Grow Rich was published in 1937. The next year, and if you've read Think and Grow Rich, there's times in here where he's like having conversations with people who passed away. Like he's people died. He's like thinking about them and like having these in his head, these conversations that come into the book. So it's pretty cool. So in 1937, 1938, he writes the manuscript for Outwitting the Devil.
Yep.
So it's a year later, and the premise of this is literally, he talks about in the beginning, it's like, I don't know if this is a literal interview or if this was a physical, just something in my head, but this is the conversation I had with the devil.
Yeah.
And it's less of like just like an interview, but more like he's put the devil on trial. Like he's on trial. He's like, you have to answer my questions. These are my questions.
During this time, the devil, I can't remember how he explained it in the book, but like the devil is forced to have to tell the truth 100% of the time. Yeah, so any question that he asked him, he cannot lie. He has to be able to tell the truth. And that's one of the questions in there is he even says like, it doesn't matter if you're religious or not. Doesn't matter if you think like whether you think it's a metaphor or whether you think he actually sat down and interviewed the devil, whether, no matter what it was, like the principle still reigned true, which is why I love the book. And like he basically like takes that element out of it. He's like, don't let that belief get in your way. Like still read the book. So anyway.
Yeah.
And 1938 is when he wrote the book, but didn't get published in 1938.
Yeah. So imagine this is one of the coolest stories ever. So 1938, he writes the book, and in the book, he actually talks about the devil's like, if you ever publish this, it'll destroy your life, it'll destroy your family, it'll destroy everything because all the people fighting against this are going to destroy you. And so he finishes the book a year after Think and Grow Rich, has the manuscript, and he is so scared he never actually publishes it. So he ends up dying, I think in 78, I believe. He passes away. His wife, second person, gets the manuscript. She reads it, and she's like, I'm not publishing this.
Yeah.
So she refuses to publish it. Later, she passes away. The Napoleon Hill Foundation gets the book, gets the manuscript. They read it, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like probably the best thing he's ever written. And then they actually contacted, this is cool, I talked to Sharon Lechner last week. So I called Sharon Lechner. She's right here. Says,
no way, that's awesome.
Annotated by Sharon Lechner. So she was probably the 4th person to ever read the manuscript. They said to her, like, what do you think we should do with this? So she says she got it, and she sat down and she was reading it. And she's like, this is one of the greatest things ever published. If you don't know Sharon Lechner, she was the one who helped with all of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books. She was the CEO of the company for a long time. Like, she helped build the biggest financial education company on the planet. And now she's coming over here to this mission, and she takes his book, and she's the one who takes it, gets the manuscript ready for print. Inside of here's got her notes, which is kind of cool. You hear her notes taking it from, it was published back in like about the last big crash with the 2008, 2009.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So she's like sharing things in here and how they relate back then, which is kind of cool. But anyway, so she published it.
And it's in the audiobook as well. Like
Yeah.
she kind of goes through and comments
She
it. So
jumps
there's
in
the
the
devil's voice, and then there's Napoleon Hill's voice, and then there's her like kind of commenting, which is actually kind of cool through the thing. Yeah.
It's kind of cool to make it natural, or make
Yeah.
it kind of tied to the time.
Yeah.
But I think even nowadays, a decade later, or whatever, it's even more applicable.
And that's what's crazy is you read the book, and if you didn't know that it was public or like that it was written back in 1938, you'd be like, oh, he's totally talking about right now.
Yeah.
Like you have no clue. You
It's
talk
funny
about
because some of the references he's talking about, Hitler and Mussolini, all these people are like, okay, well, the dictators nowadays are different, but that was who,
Right.
the things that were happening
Yeah.
right then at time.
Yeah,
But
and just like the craziness of like fear and economic turmoil and depression. I'm like, sounds like where we're at now. So anyway,
So that's the cool story about it. It's just like this book this manuscript that's been lost for generations from literally the best personal development author of our time.
Yeah.
And to bring it back, like I was just visualizing myself as Sharon Lechner reading that original. Can you imagine like just reading the manuscript and just being like
be the first, or the third or fourth person to ever read it.
so insanely cool. So anyway, that's kind of the backstory, and you get into it, and it's fascinating. So that's the story behind the book. That's why you guys have to read. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's super, super cool. And like, kind of what I'd love to do is I want you to go through, because I think this is important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for the sake of time, I mean, we could probably talk for 4 or 5 or 6 hours on this book, right? But for the sake of time, the time constraints, I think this summarizes the book super well. Yeah. And so I'd love to like go through the book. I'd love to like see your interpretation of the frameworks and kind of explain it. And then like, it's funny because whenever I go through personal development books, like you see everything from the world of like funnels and marketing and things like that. Like I cannot read a personal development book without like looking at whether or not the fundamental principles of it are like true or like what they align with, right? Yeah. So they align with Christianity or atheism or like whatnot. So I have questions about, because like I'm a huge fan of the book, you're a huge fan of the book, right? But like there's some certain things in here that he talks about that I have like questions that I'd love to know your opinion on. So I think if we go through and kind of like talk through the overall context of the book here, and then kind of pivot towards that towards the end, I think it'll be awesome.
And one thing, just kind of address that before we get too deep into it, because I know a lot of people have this fear of reading anything of like, well, what if I don't believe it? Like, well, I'm not this belief, therefore I can't. And I'm such a big believer in there's truth in most things. I think there's truth in all things. And I can read something and be like, oh my gosh, like 97% of this, I believe spot on. 3% I don't really agree with, but I can still appreciate the 97% and like love it and enjoy it and be grateful for it. In fact, I can do the same thing with my personal relationships. I can talk to somebody I don't agree 100% with and I still like them afterwards, which is something I think our world needs to learn how to do better. But
yeah, even if you lose Bitcoin bets.
Hey now.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about framework. That's 3% of him I can't stand right now. Anyway, okay, so the way my mind works, when I read it, so I read the book the first time and I was just like in this whirlwind of like, oh my gosh, there's so many things. And I was re-listening today as I was working out, trying to this is like a framework, but there's so many levels and layers and things that go deeper and deeper and deeper. So the first time I listened to it, I was just like kind of overwhelmed because there's so much good stuff. And the second time I was going through it, I was like, okay, if I was trying to doodle this to explain it to somebody, like how, like what's the overarching
what's the premise of the book?
Framework that and that's just kind of the way if you've ever read any of my books, that's how my brain works. I read like 30 books and from there I'm like, okay, this is what I think they're saying. So this is kind of the premise. I'll walk up to the board and kind of show you guys this, but the basic concept is all of us, me, you, like anybody, right? We have a decision that comes to us and we've got 2 choices every single time. And that's kind of where this whole thing starts from. So should I go over there?
Yeah. Hey, you can take my mic too.
Okay, I'm taking a mic. So I know you guys can't see this perfectly, and there's going to be, the words are all small, so I'll kind of talk through it, and hopefully that'll work. So here's me or you, and this is us, and we have decisions come to us. They come to us. Am I audio right here? Can you hear it? Cool. So we have decisions all the time. So the biggest thing is like something comes to us. We can make decisions based on one of 2 things, right? We're either making a decision based on faith or based on fear. Like that's it. Like those are the 2 things. And obviously, especially in the last year, we've noticed, I think that this has been amplified. Like, where do most of us make our decisions? I think that what you'll find is that people traditionally make their decisions one way or the other. Either they make all their decisions towards fear, all of them towards faith. And so that's something to start thinking about personally yourself. This is what I start thinking about. Like, when I'm making decisions, am I doing them through fear or through faith? And I feel like people, not 100%, but I think you tend to favor one of these. And it's important because when you start understanding Satan, like how the devil is using these as tools, it starts helping you think like, I got to start making my decisions differently or else I'm doing what he wants. So I'm going to start on the fear side. So his initial goal is to get people to make decisions based on fear. If he can get that, you become what he calls a drifter. So drifter is somebody who's drifting through life.
I want to set my mic back really quick. I think one of the things I want to just cover here really quick is kind of the premise of how this, like, even like before we dive into this, like how this came about. Because like in the book, basically Napoleon Hill asks the devil, he's like, hey, listen, I want to understand what you as the devil are doing to try to control people. Because in the book, one of the things that he claims, and I guess you do have it up here, the 98%, is that the devil controls 98% of people on the earth by getting them to do drifting, which we'll talk about here in a second, right? And so the whole premise of this book is basically Napoleon Hill is interviewing the devil and getting the devil to explain how the laws of the universe work, and basically how the devil is using those laws of the universe to pull people towards him. And then he also draws contrast of that of how God uses them to draw people towards God. And so it's like basically understanding like the laws of success, the laws of the universe, how they work. And it's, what is it? The secrets of freedom and success. So like if you he's asking questions with the specific intention of trying to figure out how the world works, how the devil's using those, and then how we can use those things to ultimately have success if we can figure out how they work. Is that perfect? Good? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Thank you for adding that. That was awesome pre-frame. And I think that hope that works.
I think we're good.
When you understand that, it's like that's the war we're in every single day, right? It's like it's every movie, right and wrong, good and evil, right? That's the fight, right? And so the devil here is showing like, this is my playbook. This is how I get people to come to my side. And so his side, he calls them drifters. Drifters are people who are drifting through life. They're not ambitious, not do anything. They're just kind of like there. And when you're a drifter, he controls you. And he said 98% of the population he controls by getting them to drift. And the first thing he does that is by initially, decision comes to act through faith or act through fear. If you act through fear, you are moving down towards being a drifter. Okay. Now, he starts going through like, what are the most so good, so many good things. But he said, how does he get people to act towards fear? So he's like, these are my 6 tools. I got 6 tools. Are you good on volume? Is the volume good? And I yell louder? Okay. These are the 6 tools, the most effective tools I have to get people to act towards fear. So the first one is poverty. If you can get them to fear poverty, like, if I do this thing, I could be poor. Then I'm going to be fearful instead of having faith and be like, I don't care if I'm poor, I'm going to go for it, right? So he gets people to have fear through poverty, through criticism. How many of you guys have had a decision to make and you have fear like, what if people criticize me? That's one of his tools, right? Ill health. I don't know if I can do that because I'm not healthy enough. Loss of love, old age, and death. So those are the 6 most effective fears that the devil uses to get you to take fear over faith. And he said of those 6, the 2 most powerful are poverty and death. If he can get you to be scared of like, I'm going to lose all my money, I'm going to be broke, or if I do that, I might die. Or, I might not, those things, those are his 2 most powerful tools. So that was really fascinating for me to look to that because I have so many times in my life when I have decisions and I am scared of criticism or I'm scared of loss of love or like whatever those things might be, right? Entrepreneurship, how many times are you trying to gamble everything? If you're scared of poverty, right? Then it's like, in fact, I have entrepreneurs all the time. This is like a conversation I have way more often than you would think where they're coming to me and they're like, they built a business to a certain point and they're stuck and they're so scared. And the thing that I always have to come back to them is like, what's the worst case scenario? Because they're in a spot where they're so fearful they can't act and they can't make decisions, they can't do anything, and they just like are frozen and they start shrinking. Like you see them going from like people who have the presence to be able to take action, do things, to like these people who are stuck and frozen. And I literally, the conversation I have over and over and over again is like, well, what's the worst case scenario? Because if you're not okay with the worst case scenario, with poverty, with death, with these things, you're not okay with those, there's no way you're going to have faith to move forward. Like you have to break yourself of the worst case scenario. And so I see this in my own life. I see it in so many entrepreneurs I coach. Like I see this as the cycle for them getting to fear. So I want everyone to take a personal reflection. Like which one of these ones are you most afraid of? Like is it poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, or death?
And I'm actually just going to stand up here because I think it'll be easier. And one of the things that what he's trying to do is he's trying to use one of these 6 things to get you to become a drifter. Ooh, we just moved the screen. That's the key thing, and I'm looking at this camera here. Okay, that's like the key thing that he's trying to get you to do is the devil wants you to become a drifter. Because if the opposite of being drifting is, and it's kind of like the characteristics of a non-drifter over here, is you have definitive purpose, you have mastery over self, you have learning from adversity, controlling environmental influence, time, positive thoughts over time, and then thinking through plans before you act on them. So if you have those things, like that's the opposite of being a drifter. If he can get you to drift, then you don't have definitive purpose, then you're not actually going after anything, then you're not going to be able to have control over it, and then he has control over you. And that's the comparison that he keeps drawing in the book, right? It's like, if he can get you to drift, then he has control over you. But if you're not a drifter, then guess what? Then he doesn't have power over you, and then you're ultimately going to have success and freedom in life. And so these are the things that he lays out in the book, and it's like, okay, look, if you choose to be a free thinker, if you choose to be someone who is this is what we're all about, has control over your mind, you're going to come into this spiritual, mental, and physical freedom category versus the drifter category. Yeah.
It's amazing. And I think Like, in fact, I almost called this column here definitive purpose because it's so, in fact, if you read Think and Grow Rich, he talks this whole chapter about definitive purpose. Like, who are the people who say, this is the thing I want, I'm going to go through it, I'm going to have definitive purpose, like no matter what happens, no matter what obstacles, trials, I'm going to go get the thing. That's definitive purpose, right? Again, that's the big premise of Think and Grow Rich, and here he comes back to it. And I almost made the title of this, but it's not.
I think it fits better.
It does, but it's not an opposite. Where this is freedom versus drifting is the opposites, and this is what it actually says in the book.
So, like, if we just summarized it as one word, drifters versus freedom.
Yeah, spiritual, mental, physical freedom. So it's like, yeah, because it's freedom of mind. Like, his whole thing is he's trying to control the mind. If you control your mind, he wins.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but a definitive purpose, like that's the number one characteristic of a non-drifter is definitive purpose, right? So it's like you're coming here, I'm going to act, and you're like, oh, I got fear. What if? What if they criticize me? And you don't act. We're here, you're like, I have a definitive purpose. This is my mission. This is the goal. I don't care what happens. I'm going to go for it, and you just go for it. And that's where you're acting in faith. Like, I don't know the path. I don't know where I'm going, but I believe in my skill set. I believe in my mission. I believe in my calling. I'm going to go, and you start moving, and eventually you show up and you end up over here.
Yeah.
So anyway, and these other ones are all amazing. We can go deeper, but
yeah, we can go deeper, and I think we can hold this. This is the same thing, right?
Okay.
So we can hold up it there,
All right.
and that way we can get kind of back to. Poor Brendan's over there. Brendan's over there, like
ruining my mics.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to dive deep down in on this is specifically on here you have this thing called hypnotic rhythm. And like if I were to do this like as an overview, it's basically like there's a human and then there's the devil and then there's God. Like this is basically how he describes it in the book, right? There's the devil and there's God and there's the human. And the human is going through life and there's the devil pulling for him and there's God pulling for him, right? And then that person has the choice.
It's like the two angels and devil on your shoulder.
Yeah, pretty much, right? And then you have the choice to either choose faith or choose fear, which is why, like, one of the things that I've been so adamantly kind of fighting right now is, like, don't live in fear. Like, why is anybody fearful of anything? And, like, I know that's easy for me to say because I'm not afraid of death, right? And that's literally one of the top things that he uses to control the mind, right? And you look around the world today and everyone's so afraid of dying or something. Like, who cares? Like, whatever. Like, I know where I'm going when I die. But, like, that's one of the things that I've been fighting so strongly. So it's like, I either have fear and I become a drifter, and I have faith and I become someone with definitive purpose and I have freedom ultimately in my life. But there's this thing underneath that is like kind of the core crux of what ultimately keeps us there. And it's like, I actually have notes on it, but it's this thing called hypnotic rhythm.
It was interesting because he talks about hypnotic rhythm after he talks about drifters, and he's like, my goal is to get them hypnotic rhythm. He says that if you go from routines to habits, your habits become habitual, and they're habitual, they become hypnotic rhythm, where you're stuck in this cycle. And he says, that's how you control the drifters. He's like, that's how the universe controls everything.
Yeah.
Positive and negative. That's why if you look at the bottom here, it's got the little whirlpool at the bottom for hypnotic rhythm. It's the same thing. So if you have good habits and you're doing things, you get a spot where eventually it's a pattern that you're just stuck in, and it's easier to stay in the 2%. If you're in the 98%, it's easier to stay there too. Like hypnotic rhythm serves all things.
And that's the thing I think is so interesting about it, is the way that he explains it is like hypnotic rhythm is the thing that keeps the world in harmony, right? And one of the quotes out of the book that I wrote down is nature, which in this particular case is talking about nature in the form of hypnotic rhythm. Nature is not interested in morals. As such, she is not interested in right or wrong. She is not interested in justice or injustice. She's interested only in forcing everything to express action according to its nature, right? So when you go into hypnotic rhythm, either positively or negatively, like you get into the rhythm of nature, right? And like nature is interested in, if you look at it purely from an objective standpoint, he's saying that like nature is only interested in making the thing, the object, in this case you, do what it's been designed to do. So if you're choosing to be in hypnotic rhythm in the spiritual freedom side of things, like nature's going to keep you in that. And that's why, like, it's almost like rewiring your whole brain and your whole life for success. It's like why successful people continue to have success, and it's why non-successful people do not have success. And I think like understanding that and understanding that like hypnotic rhythm is like, it's like, I almost like to think of it as like the subconscious mind, right? Like it's the subject, like once your subconscious mind goes into this hypnotic rhythm to just do the same thing over and over and over again, it's very, very difficult to escape that.
Yeah. And you see it happen in your life all the time. Like there's times in my life when I was wrestling where it's like, I had so many routines, so many things that I'd structured my life where it happens on autopilot, like, cause it was just, that was what I did. Right. And so it was perfect. I didn't have to like every day figure out like, how am I going to be successful? How am I going to have definitive purpose? Like it was like, it become part of me. Right.
Yeah.
And something in business or other parts. And I think that it's true. Like we get in these patterns, these ruts, these things, whatever it is, either positively or negatively, but that's the hypnotic rhythm where that's the goal, is to get in those, but in the positive side, not the negative side. Cause you see it's a downward spiral.
Yeah.
Right. Either upward spiral positively or downward spiral negatively. But if you get in that hypnotic rhythm, that's the thing that keeps you in that spot.
Yeah.
And anyway, does that make sense?
Yeah. What was the number one? Like I had a very definitive takeaway from the book, right? Like I read it and there's so much, obviously there's like, you could read it a million times and like keep getting gold nuggets, but like, what was the thing that was like stuck out to you that was like the most powerful of it that caused you to literally go on Instagram and be like, yo, everybody read this book right now?
Well, for me, so again, everyone's a different spot. So I think it's good to read this book for everyone to kind of see where you fit, right? And anyway, maybe I have a distorted view of myself, but I feel like I'm someone who acts in definitive purpose. I feel like I act in faith most of the times. Like, so I feel like I'm on the side. So the thing that was so powerful for me, if you look in the middle of my thing, there's these two columns here, was he starts saying, he's like, so when someone uses definitive purpose, does that mean they're free from you? He's like, no. He's like, as soon as they're using definitive purpose, he's like, these are the tools I use to try to get them to become drifters. And I started looking at the list of things he uses to get them to become drifters. And I was like, oh my gosh, I see those patterns in my life. I see the things that are pulling me to that side as well. And it became this like warning for me of like, okay, these are the things to protect yourself from, because we're not free. Like, it's not like I do good things, therefore I'm going to be good forever. It's like, no, the entire time he's trying to get you to the other side. And so for me, it was interesting. You can kind of see some of these ones I list up here, like the temptations he uses to get someone who is free to become a drifter. So number one was flattery. And it was interesting. He said that the way he uses flattery is in women, he uses vanity, and in men, he uses egotism. And I've seen that so many times in my own personal life, where like you get your ego and you start like reading your own bio, you drink your own Kool-Aid, and you're like, I'm amazing. And as soon as you do that, it starts shifting you from this state of like freedom to drifters. And I've seen, I've got personal friends who have let ego destroy their families, destroy their businesses, destroy their lives. And I always have fear of that. And I see myself slipping that often. Like, it's definitely a temptation that's like one of the things for me that pulls me in. I'm trying to like be careful of. And it's funny, people always tell me, like, I feel like you're one of the few guys in the industry that don't have a big ego. I'm like, I have a huge ego. I try to be aware of it.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for my wife. And one of my buddies told me, he's like, if it wasn't for Colette, he's like, you would have the biggest head in the world. Like, she's the one that like, keeps me focused, you know what I mean?
I feel like that's Leah with me too, 100%.
Oh, it's so good.
100%.
But I think it was interesting for men, for egotism, and women, it said vanity, which is interesting too. So those are two things there. Next was failure. And he talked about failure from both sides. He said that the failure can be something that actually serves you, because you fail, you see what's wrong, and you readjust. But some people go through failure and then they slip to like, okay, this didn't work, and they're out.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot.
Well, and that's even listed here, where it's learning from adversity.
Yeah.
Right? So like that's one of the key things. Like, how do you use failure? Like, if you're going to be a drifter, you're going to like be like, failure, ew, yuck, and I'm never going to do it again. Yeah. Versus a successful person.
I used to go all the time and fail. I'm like, oh, I tried the thing, didn't actually work. It's like, okay, it worked for like 800 other people, but it didn't work for you. Like, maybe it was you. Maybe the approach was, it's like, it's so interesting where it's like, if it comes back to, if you've read Jocko's book.
What's Jocko's book?
Yeah, extreme ownership.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing, right? Like, the failure happens and it's like, oh, I gotta blame on them. Boom. Like, instantly you're a drifter, right? Where you feel like, it was me, I did it wrong, what do I gotta change? Like, the extreme ownership, like, that's the shift from failure. Whereas you take the extreme ownership, boom, you're staying over here. But if you don't, and I have that problem all the time, like, I think, like, something doesn't happen with my team, right, or whatever, and I want to like point the fingers, and it's like, but I'm the leader of the team. But it's so much easier to point out than to point back in. And so for me, that was the one that, again, another one I know. So like, when I have my failures, like, I point out or in, because point out, I'm slipping into drifting. Propaganda, bribes, food, sex, like all these different things he was using. Like, food one was interesting. He was talking about, he's like, when men and women become rich and they have all these things, I get them through food, but all of a sudden they start eating it gluttonous, and all of a sudden their body gets not healthy, and then there's harder to move, and I don't know, I'm sure you felt that when you're not eating healthy, your mind gets cloudy, and all these things, and it's very easy to become a drifter.
Yeah.
And so it's just all these tools he's using to try to get you to shift from one to the other. Those things were, in my time of life right now, where I was just like, okay, cool, I've got walls I can start protecting myself of. I can become more aware of it. And when you're aware of something, it's so much easier to fight it as opposed to when you don't know.
And like, when you're successful too, like, everything's convenient. And that's kind of like one of the things that he brought up in the book too, like, that I noticed in my life. Like, I was like, I'm thinking back to when I first started. I was like, man, I was sleeping on my buddy's couch. You know what I mean? Like, for 3 months, like and I worked my butt off and everything like that. I'm like, why do I lack that drive sometimes? Like, why don't I have that anymore? It's like, because life is convenient, right? Because if I sleep until 8 o'clock, or if if I don't perform today, it's like my life doesn't change at all. Like, you know what I mean? But back then it did. And so when things become convenient, it's super easy to come back into that like drifter mode.
Yeah, 100%. And that's one of the hardest things, is just, I think, at least for me, when I was growing up, I always thought like there's a point where you're like, you made it. In fact, I remember this one time, my business was doing well at the time. We had a bunch of employees. I remember hiring this guy to come consult me on something, and he came out and he was looking at all this stuff, and he's like, so tell me, like when was it you felt like when did you know you made it? And I was like, oh, I'm still freaking out. Like, I have no idea. Like, I don't feel like I made it. And I think in my life, I always thought there was gonna be a point where I'm like, I made it or figured the thing out or whatever. But I never got there. And I feel like I feel like the second I do, that's like when it's going to start. Like that's the thing. And so I think being more aware of that, just like this is a constant thing, and that's okay. But it's a constant, you know, between God and Satan. Like there's this constant, like every moment is like each of them are fighting for it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like if you give up here, then you slip back over to there. Like you can't just. There's no neutral ground.
So I actually want to talk about that because I think one of the biggest, the number one thing, like you said, of a non-drifter is the definitive purpose.
Yep.
And like, I have noticed that in my life, even like recently. So, I mean, over the past year and a half, and I've been working with Katie Richardson, you know that, like, you know, just really getting clear on like what the next steps of things are. And like, my definitive purpose, if you will, like when I first started my entrepreneurship journey, like was this, I just don't want to be poor anymore, right? I'm like, my definitive purpose is to not worry about money and to get out of debt and like just be free, right? Like be able to make decisions or whatever. And then I like got there, and then there was like this next definitive purpose, and they were like kind of like incremental, like almost goals, but not like this overwhelming like definitive purpose, right? And so like going through the process of that, of course, with my brother dying and like that whole kind of shattering everything. Like for you, you've built ClickFunnels, you've have a wildly successful company. People look up to you and are like, oh my gosh, Russell, like you're on top of the world, you're amazing, you've made it, like. At now, you've just said, hey, I don't feel like I've made it yet. I still feel like I have a long way to go. Like, how do you, has your purpose changed since you started compared to where you're at now? And B, like, how do you continue to remind yourself of that purpose? Or how do you find that purpose? Like, when, like, you could do nothing for the rest of your life and be like totally fine. Like, how do you find purpose?
I'd be a drifter at that point.
But right, you would be a drifter. I can just see Russell sitting on the beach. No, actually, I can't even imagine what that would look like for Russell on the beach for long periods of time. But like, what would that look like for you? Like, or how do you find that purpose?
So, you asked about if my purpose has changed.
Yeah.
So I would say, in my mind, it's kind of two things. There's like the people that I've been called to serve has not changed, right? So like, I feel like I've been called to serve entrepreneurs. Like those are my people. Those people that I'm here. And so for me, it's like, what are all the ways I can help them? And so initially it was like, I'm gonna do seminars and teach, write books. That was the first thing, right? And then it's like, oh, we're gonna build software. And then it's like, oh, we're gonna do events. And like, it kept adding these things on. And so like that was the thing, right? And so my purpose was like, what are all the things I can do to help an entrepreneur be more successful? Like that's my vision. That's my mission. That's my thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like now that, like, again, after I finished the 3 books, I was like, I feel like that, again, that's the trilogy. Like, that's what people need. And then we have Funnel Hacking Live. That's amazing. We have these things in place. Like, all the things there are kind of, they're there. And I think there's things, there's big updates we have coming to ClickFunnels. There's other things we do to make things better. But for me, it's like there's not a lot more. Again, there's not like, I'm going to come out with some magic funnel and I'm like, oh, it changes everything again. Like, it's there, right? So for me, it's like, okay, I'm still called to serve these people. What's the next level of success? Like, what's the next thing I need to do? And for me, I started looking like, what were the things that I struggled with? And so much of it was not, it was like, I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the information, which is why, the last 2 decades has been focused on that. But the next thing was like, I had to become someone different. Like, who did I have to become to be successful? And I look at so many entrepreneurs who are coming into my world, these people who I'm called to serve, I'm giving them funnels. Man, they don't believe in themselves. They have horrible identities. They're choosing fear over faith every single time, and they're not having success. And so for me, it's like, hey, I still have the same people. I'm still called to serve the same people, but what am I, like, what's the next thing I need to help them with? And if you just look at like just my book trilogy, like the first one was .com secrets, right? It's like, they need to understand funnels. That was the book. And it's like, hey, now I understand funnels. And now everyone's like, I'm building funnels. But then their funnels weren't working, right? They weren't converting. And I'm like, oh, they don't know how to like tell stories, write copy or, expert secrets. I'm like, expert secrets. It's like, okay, now they understand that. And I thought I was done. And then I'm like, okay, some people have these funnels that like have really good copy, but Facebook shut down their account and they're screwed, or they have no traffic or whatever. I'm like, oh, my people need traffic. So I'm getting traffic, and that's Traffic Secrets book, And so for me, the last year and a half, especially, as you know, we've been in this insane environment of insanity.
How do you even describe it?
And I'm watching these people I've been called to serve melting down, choosing fear in every single direction over and over and over and over and over again. I'm seeing people who don't have an identity, don't have beliefs, don't have rules, don't have values, don't have all these things they need to actually have the structure to implement any of the stuff we talked about.
Yeah.
And that's why I started geeking back in this personal development stuff, partially because it's for myself, because I'm trying to protect myself and strengthen myself. But for me, like, the only reason I go deep on anything, like if you look at my DISC profile, one of my things is I have very, very high, like my highest value is ROI. Like if I don't see return on investment in something, I can't do it. Like that's why I struggle in school. That's why I struggle in so many things. That's why when I started trying to read scriptures again, I struggled it until I started a podcast, because now there's return on my investment. I'm going to learn this thing, but I'm going to give it to somebody else, and there's my return on investment. Now I can do it, and I feel fulfilled by it, right?
Which, by the way, I'm going to plug podcast number 3 is going to be about that. So anyway, yeah.
Ooh. And but same thing here. So like I started going back through and started reading these things, and for a while it was tough because I'm reading these things, and for me it's like what's the return on investment? Like it's good for me, but like I've been called to serve. Like it's not just right. There's again, I talk about this in the new book we'll talk about in a minute, but growth, I talk about four secrets to growth and contribution, right? I love growth because it's good for me, but I thrive on the contribution. Like it's me sharing that gets me excited. And so I was going through these things, and that's when probably like 3 or 4 months ago when I was like, hey, I'm learning all these principles and these things. I'm doodling all this stuff. Like I need to have something I'm putting it towards, or else I'm not going to be able to continue the momentum I need to keep doing this and keep figuring out these things. And so that's why I started, as you know, on my 4th book, which is not a marketing book.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. Really, okay, I really do want to go there. However, I want to. There's one question I want to ask you first. That's I kind of want to like pull back maybe another layer of Russell that people like. I don't know. Maybe you've told this story before. I don't know. I don't even know what the story is. I'm about to ask you. But like, so like my number one takeaway from the book was how much fear controls people, right? Like that was my number one thing. And like for me, like, and this has come through a tremendous amount of mental work and tremendous amount of like personal identity work over the course of the past 12 to 16 months of just like tears and just facing my own like fears and insecurities and like bringing them to the light and like working through them. But like there's not a whole lot of things I'm afraid of, right? Like very few things where I'm like look at them like, oh my gosh, I just do me and like whatever, like criticism, and it doesn't really bother me or whatever. But there's certain certain instances that come up where I'm like, ooh, I'm afraid of failure in that specific scenario for that specific thing. And I'd be curious to know, like, for you, as you built ClickFunnels, I'm sure there were moments of fear. And I'm sure there were moments when like this side of things started to creep in, but like you worked through that. And so I'd be curious to know like what was one of the biggest times when you were building ClickFunnels that you were afraid? And how did you work through that? Like what's that story?
Oh man.
Because I feel like we hear like the marketing version of it,
the highlight reels.
Well, we do, right? Like, and they serve a very specific purpose. And like I always laugh when people like want to criticize, be like, Russell only tells this part of the story or whatever. I'm like, do you understand why he's doing that? Like, do you understand like it's fitting into like it's at Funnel Hacking Live or it's at this or whatever. I'm like, there's a purpose for that. It's not like he's trying to do that, but I want to know the other side of it. Like I want to know like the behind the scenes of like what was that moment when you're like, this is not worth it. I'm going to shut it all down, or I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able. I don't know what the story is.
Yeah, definitely for me. The part that was the hardest, it was the first year of ClickFunnels. We just launched it. And I remember because when Todd built it, he told me, he was like, and I, in my head, I thought we were going to get 10,000 members month 1. Like that was in my head. And Todd was like, okay, well, just so you know, as soon as we pass 10,000 members, the way I coded it, it's going to have to be different. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I'm going to get 10,000 members, right? So we go and launch it. We don't get 10,000 members. I'm kind of depressed. But we start pursuing this thing, start working towards it. And within about a year, we got 10,000 members. And during that time, ClickFunnels started doing weird things where like it would just go down for like 5 minutes and be back. Like, what just happened? And like, oh, some blah 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 techie thing happened, and yeah, so they fix it. Like, hey, good, whew, and then it would go down. And this time down 15 minutes, and 15 minutes down. It's funny because 1 minute I'm everyone's hero, right? They're like, we love you, Russell. You made our life so much easier, making money. They're like, I'm getting the messages and just like feeling the ego and like all the things. And just like, this is amazing. And then it goes down. And I want you guys to understand, like when ClickFunnels would go down, it wasn't like, hey man, it's down. Like it was like, I want to kill you. Like you owe me $2,000 in ads for my 15-minute window that's down. Like I'm gonna sue you. Like death threats. Like I went from like this, like the hero of the day to I want to kill you. And message coming in, I'm like, and I'm getting these things, and Todd's not getting them because no one knows, he's kind of behind the scenes, and I'm just like, these people want to kill me. Like they're that angry, like they want to sue me. They're like all these things, and then they're publicly posting everywhere how horrible I am, how bad. And like the second someone slips, everyone wants to jump up and like start throwing daggers at them. Like it's insane. I've seen it happen to so many people. Like I have friends who I've seen it happen to recently, where it's like, everyone loves them until they do something, and then it's just like everyone wants to pounce out.
And like half the time, it's not even their fault.
It's crazy. And so that's happening, right? And so it keeps happening. We get back up, and then I'm like, "This is gonna work good." Like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm like, okay, it's gonna be good. So like, then we plan on that, and then again, it would go good for 2 or 3 weeks, then something would happen, and it just kept happening. And the longer we go, more members happen. It would happen more often. Then it would happen longer, and it was just like horrible. Because I remember one time I was speaking at a GKIC event. And I'm in the hotel room. We just got there. Dave and I were there. We get everything ready, and it goes down. We're down for like 30 minutes. I'm freaking. I'm supposed to be on stage in like 30 minutes, right? Or like an hour or something. Gosh. And it's down. And I'm messaging, and I remember voxing Todd. I'm like, "Hey, it's down again." He messaged back all nice, like, "Oh yeah, like." Anyways, but he was just like, he's like, "Oh yeah, it's down again. We'll work on it." So I messaged back. And I was like, this is happening a lot. Like, are you sure we're okay? You seem all nice and calm. Like, you okay? And it's funny because Todd's super respectful. He doesn't ever swear around me or anything. And he messaged back, and I've never heard Todd scared before. And he messaged back, and he was, I won't repeat what he said, but it was just like, what he said and how he said it was just like, we're screwed. Like, he say it like 4 or 5 times in a row, and then he like ended, and I was just like,
And you're about to go on stage?
Yeah, and I was like,
oh my gosh.
and I was just freaking out. I'm like, I'm about to go on stage and try to convince all this audience that I've got the greatest thing in the world. And my partner who built it is freaking out and doesn't know how to stabilize this thing. And I remember just being like sick to my stomach, scared, all these fears, like all the anxiety, all the inadequacy, all those things. And I remember I'm just freaking out. And then we got it back up. And then Dave's like, hey, you're on like 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, so I'm like, do my things and running downstairs, and I come on stage, and I was just, anyway, just in my head and my mind and my body, just like freaking out, right? And do the presentation. I know the presentation, even if I'm scared, it's going to convert pretty similar. It's convert well. People bought it. Everyone's excited. And I remember afterwards, it was weird. This is the most weird thing. I don't even know who it was. If you're listening, you should message me. Some dude like lingered afterwards, and he's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, fine. How's it going? He's like a chiropractor, but like a woo-woo one, right? Where they do energy stuff or something.
Yeah.
And he's like, can I adjust you? And I'm like, that's weird. He's like, no, like, I don't really do normal adjusting. It's this other weird kind. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. This guy's creepy to me. What's that? But for some reason, I'm like, sure, like whatever.
Right,
so he takes me in this other room, and he starts doing adjusting. He's doing like, the muscle testing and all sorts of stuff on me, which I never
some random dude.
Yeah, I'd never had that happen before. He was an attendee at the event, so he was there.
Right.
And it was weird because he's just like, you have all this tension here, all these things, and he's trying to figure out why. And so eventually, and again, some people think this stuff's crazy. I used to think it was crazy. Nowadays, I don't know.
No, I don't think it's crazy.
Anyway, it's interesting. But he's doing this muscle testing, and he muscle tests, and he's like, the thing that you're experiencing right now inside your body is a reflection of something that happened. I can't remember, like, it was like 3.6 years ago or something like that. He's like, what happened 3.5 years ago? I'm like, I have no idea. I couldn't remember. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, that was the last time my company collapsed. And we didn't go through bankruptcy, but we had to fire almost 100 people. We had to shut everything down. It was all this stuff. And he's like, your body's experiencing the same things right now that you experienced at that moment. And that's this tension and this thing.
Oh my gosh.
And it was crazy. And he did all this stuff to try to release it and everything. But also I realized, it's like, oh my gosh, my biggest thing is I built this thing up. People think I'm a hero again right now. And I remember it happened 3.5 years ago when I lost everything, and how much pain and how much all these things, the poverty I got, the criticism I got, the ill health I got, the loss of love I got, friends, family, coworkers walking out on me. I wanted to die. Old ladies, like all my greatest fears came back in that moment. And I'm in this spot, and I don't know how to fix it because I can't code. Like, when I go to college and learn how to code,
gosh, that's
I don't know what
worst.
to do.
Oh man!
So that's happening. The next week,
It's out of your
we're
hands.
flying to London to speak in London. They invited my family to come with me, so my wife and kids were all flying in London. And I told parts of this story before, but we're in the air. Everything's good. The kids are having so much fun. They're flying, and we land. We get to London, and there's in your phones, like, the chips don't work. So
you gotta swap them. Yeah.
So we're driving around. I finally get our chips in there, and as soon as it does, all of a sudden my phone's just like, and I don't know what it is. But I'm looking, and there's text messages, there's instant messages, Voxers, there's all these things, hundreds. Not like, I'm not exaggerating. People like hundreds, probably like 10. No, like hundreds and hundreds on every platform of people sending me death threats, sending me they want to kill me, sending me they hate me, sending me I'm screwing them over, sending me all that, like, just this stuff. And I'm looking at my phone, and I'm just like, I don't know what even happened. So I'm finally trying to get Todd. I got a hold of him, and he's like, yeah, we're down. We've been down for like 4 or 5 hours. He's like, if we're able to get it back up. And I remember him saying if and not when. And I was just like,
And you're in London
with my
about
family
to speak.
And so I don't even know. I went back hotel room, and we had like 2 hotels conjoining for the kids. I was like, can everyone go in this room for a minute? And I shut the door, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do. We're down. I don't know if we're going to get back up. Like, I'm supposed to speak the next day to talk about ClickFunnels. And it was one of those things where I was just like in so much fear. Like, I wanted to hide. I just wanted to like not say anything. I just wanted to be quiet.
Yeah, especially as an introvert.
Yeah, especially an introvert who's got literally hundreds of people tell me how much they hate me. And I don't know what to do. And this is one of those moments where it's just like the fear and the faith. Like, I wanted to go to fear. Like, that sounded so nice, just to hide and like, but I was like, I can't, because like this is my life. This is all the stuff we've worked towards for so long. And in that moment, I had the impression of like, you should go live on Facebook. I was like, I don't want to go live on Facebook. Like, you have to tell people what's happening. I was like, what kind of CEO in the middle of this crash gets online? Like, hey, our company's down. And like put on the happy face, like, but it's okay because let me blame the servers or blame the thing. I had a million people I could blame because it was,
It's not your fault, Russell.
but I was
Never your fault, right?
So finally I was like, all right. So I told the kids I'm going to be on like 15 minutes. So I clicked go and all of a sudden I'm live. And of course, because it's
Everybody
live,
hates you.
everybody pops in because they're trying to figure out, because they don't want to kill me. Like, like Russell's here, this is our time. And first I popped up, like you start seeing the comments, like you're effing kid, like you killed my business, like all these things, and just like you owe me how much money, like all these things. And I'm just like, okay. And instead of like doing what I wanted to do, which was like blame, point to other people, I was like, I'm pissed. And I was like, this is not okay. Like my business is down, your business is down, you trusted me, you trusted us. We are not doing what's right. Like this is not acceptable. I'm not like, and I tried my best. In fact, the video's still live. It's on. If you go to my Facebook page and go to videos and scroll down to year one of ClickFunnels, the video's still live there.
That's crazy.
And basically I just tried
Somebody go find it and post in the comments. Seriously, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, and I just posted. I can't remember if I posted in the ClickFunnels group or maybe it was in my, anyway. I remember I found it a little while ago to look at it again. I remember watching it. I was just like, oh, that sucked. But I did my best, like try to take that, like definitive purpose. This is not okay.
Well, and that's
this
it.
is what we're trying to do. I'm just going to take faith. And it was crazy because I remember we posted that while Todd and the team was working their butts off. And luckily through so many miracles, they got everything back up. We had a backup from right before it hit. We didn't lose anything other than the 8 hours we were down. And we expected like the next day that half our members would cancel, everything's gonna be gone. And it was crazy how by taking the action of faith, like people came in and instead of being upset, they're like, you know what? Thank you. Like, thank you for not hiding. Thank you for telling us you're upset. Thank you for understanding this is not acceptable and not trying to be like, oh, thank you for taking responsibility. And over the next week, we didn't see any, like, it wasn't like, signups and cancellations. We watch those two numbers all the time. It wasn't like a big drop. It was just like, didn't change. And after that, we made changes. We figured things out and got things solid and saw things stable. And that was the last time we went down for more than, a little blip here or there.
Yeah.
But that was probably the biggest thing. And I remember just being, anyway, so.
That's crazy. Well, I feel like that comes back to having a definitive purpose.
Yeah. Like
because you had a goal, like you were all in, because like without that, like you throw in the towel and you say, this isn't worth it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if you are not crystal clear or like at least very, very emotionally attached to that outcome or to that goal of that definitive purpose to where you're at, like you should shut everything down there and you walk. That's crazy. I've never heard that story before.
Whew, I'm like sweating reliving it. Thanks for that.
No problem. I'm sure the audience loved it though. So
anyway, it was a scary time between those two things happening back to back. And like I said, and then we started working towards it. And man, Todd and Ryan, all the people on our team who figured out the problems and solidified things and brought in the right people. And it's crazy because people look at ClickFunnels like, you should know how to not go down. It's like, you don't understand that. To that point, we went from a bunch of entrepreneurs trying to make something to like at that point we were like the 300th most visited website in the world. Like, there's not many people on this planet who know how to handle the database architecture behind that. We didn't know how to do it, and so we're trying to find people. We literally hire people who like they're charging like 10 grand an hour to do database administration. So you hire them like, okay, here's 20 grand. You get 2 hours to log in and look around, like here's all the mistakes, and then they go back and you try to fix them. They're like, okay, here's another 10 grand, another hour. Like that's the people who like ran eBay and Amazon. Those are the people you have to hire to come and look at these problems because they're not problems that most people deal with, right? Like you think about it. We tell people we have 120,000 members. That's true. That's 120,000 people's websites. And most of them more than one. Most of them have 10, 20, 50, 100. So like there's, I don't know, 250,000, 500,000 websites running all on our servers. So it's like, like that's the, like no one deals with that stuff.
Brad, how many do we have? How many, like, Brad's over here in the audience. We probably got like 50 just there
so it's like,
that we're running through.
So like these are problems, like it's not like, not normal problems that like most people know how to solve. We don't know how to solve them. So it's like, how do we do that? Like, yeah, every level there's a new level of stress and problems and things that they keep coming up that you just, if you don't have that definitive purpose and that dream and that vision, that thing, like there's so many things pulling you off the path. Like, there's a million things trying to pull you to become a drifter. From flattery to failure to propaganda to bribes to like all these things are trying to do that. Like the world's stacked to get you. In fact, according to the book, 98% of people are there.
Yeah, 98%.
So
That's
like,
crazy.
So it's like, first off, it comes back to like, if you want to shift yourself back, the very first thing is like, coming back to the very first question is like, am I doing this decision based out of faith or fear? Like that's the transition point. It's not like, okay, I got to fix all this crap and like I got to, no, it's like, okay, come back to the very beginning. And if you start shifting your decision-making process to like, I'm scared. You can still be scared. You still have fear. I still have fear all the time. I'm sure you do too. Like, do I do that? But it's like, you don't act in fear. You act in faith. Like, okay, I could lose everything. I could be criticized. I could, but this is my definitive purpose. This is my vision. This is where I have to go. Therefore, I will act in faith, regardless of these things that they happen. I have to be okay with the worst case scenario. I have to be okay that if I screw up, people are going to criticize me, or else I'm not going to be able to move forward in faith.
Yeah.
And that's the conundrum. That's where you have to get thick skin and be okay with these things. And I think for me, I spend time consciously thinking about each of these, right? Like you talked about death, you don't fear death. Like for me, for a big part of my life, I did fear death. And there's parts of me, like I'm thinking about today, like if I was to die, like I wouldn't be scared of death, but I'd be scared of like my kids not having a dad.
Yeah. Yep.
But like the thing, like the belief that I have, and the new book goes deep in these kind of things, which I'm really excited to share. But like my belief about death, like we have to have beliefs and values and rules around all these kind of things. But my belief about death is I strongly, strongly, strongly believe that none of us will live on this planet 1 second longer or shorter than God wants us to.
Mm-hmm.
Like I believe that to my core soul.
Yep.
So because of that, I'm okay with that, because it's not like all of a sudden accidentally I'm going to catch something and I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And then God's like, oh crap, I missed that one. Like that's not going to happen.
Right.
We all, there's plans, there's purpose, there's things that are happening. And I have that as a belief. And maybe it's not true, but it's my belief.
Yeah.
Therefore, because I believe that, I'm not scared of death.
Yep.
Like if it happens, that sucks. And I like horror with my kids, but again, it's part of the plan. Therefore, I'm not afraid of death because of that.
Yeah. And I had never really even thought about death until like my brother like obviously passed away.
Came face to face with
Yeah, like holy cow, like freak accident, helicopter crash, you know what I mean, over in Kenya. It's like what the heck. And like I flew around the world trying to figure out what I believed and like kind of what I thought. And like kind of the conclusion, but the belief that I have about death is I'm like, all right, when I die, that's when my life starts. Like, you know what I mean? I'm like, okay, cool. Like this is what do they say? It's a whisper in the wind, right? Like it's a flash of hand. Like life is, we're here and we're given some choices and God's like, all right, here you got your 80 or 90 years on life and you get a choice. You can either choose to accept me or reject me. And then eternity starts, right? Or doesn't start, it always is. You know what I mean? And so like for me, I'm like, sweet. And coupled with or partnered with like what you said of like, I don't think God makes mistakes. So if I die, like even if it's a dumb, stupid decision that I made that led to that, like it's not like God didn't factor in my stupidity, right? And so because I know that, it's confidence. Yeah. So okay, I want to do this because we're talking about all these amazing books. Yeah. And I don't know, this is probably like 2-3 weeks ago, maybe it was a little bit longer than that, you start hinting on Instagram about this book. And I'm like, oh my gosh, another book? What could it possibly be? And then last week I'm out here and you start telling me about it and like what it is. And it's not a marketing book. Yeah. It's the next piece. And it's your first ever, and I don't want to spoil it for him, but I'm going to say it's like your first ever take at personal development. Yeah. Like talk to us about this book. When is it coming out? Like how did this come about? And like the details of that. Cause I'm super, super excited for it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's my only. Hopefully, but I said it about.
I don't believe that at all. There's going to be a trilogy for. Russell, you're going to be writing books too.
Writing's so painful, but this one, like, it's me coming back. Like, we launched Traffic Secrets. The world goes chaotic, and I have more time, and I'm trying to just occupy.
Which, by the way, how perfect time. I mean, my heart was completely broken when you had to cancel the Traffic Secrets event because I was supposed to speak there. I was like, no, but how perfect of a timing was Traffic Secrets.
There are pros and cons of it. It was really good from a selling book standpoint. It was really hard from like a New York Times bestseller list, which we actually hit, which is I'm still freaking out about. It was tough because like Amazon wasn't shipping books, things weren't shipped, like all sorts of chaos. Like they said books weren't essential, and so like it was hard to hit lists because you'd sell 10,000 copies of a book in a week, but Amazon was waiting 2, 3, 4 weeks to ship them because it wasn't. And so like they wouldn't. The way that the lists work is like, how many did you sell in retail outlets? How many did you sell on USA Today? Like they're all the things, right? And so like when you have the big push, but then some books aren't being counted for like 4 or 5 weeks later because Amazon doesn't consider them essential. They're not sure they can let. So like for what normally takes 10,000 books or something to hit a bestseller list, we had to hit over 100,000 to be able to do it. Like it was way harder, way more stressful, but we got it. But it was like, anyway, but it was easier to sell because I had more time. Yeah, so there's a lot of pros with that. Plus it was crazy because like in the beginning of the book I talked about there's a storm coming and then literally it was like, we're in the middle of the storm. You should get this book
literally right now.
But anyway, so I was in the season where, and I think I'm similar to you and I think a lot of people in our community where it's just like my mind's always spinning. I can't stop.
Yeah, I cannot shut it off
It's
ever.
like there's got to be something I got to be thinking about. And it was harder for me to find stuff for me to like geek out on inside of marketing and business. Like it was just hard to find the next. I don't know. Every level you get to, it's harder to find the next level, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm sure the time when Michael Jordan's like, I can't find people to push me anymore. Like where do you go? And it's just like
like Tom Brady in the NFL, just completely dominating every team that's out there. Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, so not that I'm that level or anything.
Right.
But for me, it's just it gets harder and harder to find things, and I have to dig so hard to like find like the gold, right? And so I started just looking again at some of these things, right? And like that's when I found like I stumbled on this book, and it's just like every page is gold, and it's like I'm lit up again, I'm on fire. I'm just like, but then for me, it's like again, I talked about this earlier. Like for me, like one of my highest values is ROI. Like what's my return on my investment? And so I'm learning these things. I'm growing myself personally, but I'm feeling empty because I'm not sharing them. So it's like, what's the platform? That's why I'm like, everyone go read this. I need to have this conversation with somebody. Like, so I'm having, Dave reading it. Like everyone I can get to read. I'm trying to get to read so I can have these conversations. And then when you're like, hey, do you want to talk about it on a podcast? Like, yes, like let me spew forth some of this stuff. Cause like it's in me and like, if I can't contribute, it seems like I'm wasting it. And so there was other things. And I started looking more and more like, and right now I've got 5 kids. I've got 3 of my kids are teenagers now, and man, teenagers have been way harder than I ever thought or expected. It's weird. Kids are really fulfilling, but man, teenagers have been it's different for me. And like I'm feeling like I have to grow to understand myself better, but also understand them. And what I envisioned my kids as teenagers are going to be, what it is, has been so much different. I think for me, at times it got me like depression and like sadness and these things. I was like, I shouldn't be like depressed this time in my kid's life. This is like the greatest time I could be with them, but I got to shift my mind. And so it was me trying to like do some work on myself to like not fix myself, but to get myself in a spot where I could enjoy the season. And then number 2 is how do I serve them now at this point?
Yeah.
Because I envisioned the way I was going to serve my kids was the way my dad did, right? Where it was like, he drove me to wrestling practice and we like traveled the world and we worked out super hard because that's what I needed, right? And I assumed that that's what my kids were going to need, and it's not. Like, that's not what they want. They want like almost the opposite of those things. I'm like, but I have these gifts and these skills I can give you, right? And like, I don't want them. I'm like, I can help you start a business. Like, we don't care. Like, they don't value money because they've always had it. It's like all these things where I'm like, every gift that I have that's like all my unique abilities, I want to give my kids and I don't want them. So I'm like, okay, and I'm learning this thing of like, well, instead of me trying to give my kids these things that I think that were so valuable to me, it's like, I just sit back and understand like what's actually valuable to them, which is so much harder. And I'm learning this process. And so like, as I'm going through this lens of trying to learn these things, understand them, and trying to figure them out for myself, and I'm stumbling upon things like this and other things, it just got to the point where it's like, I need to write this book, first off for myself. Like when you write books, if anyone who's done it, like there's this weird thing as you start reading, you start seeing connections you don't see any other spot. I feel like God opens up insights to you that are just magical. Like I remember
when you start writing.
Yeah,
100%.
Because you have to get deep in a topic and you have to study all these things to figure things out. And like I remember the first time I really understood this is after I finished Traffic Secrets, I wanted to rewrite and run re-edit.com and Expert Secrets and publish a trilogy. So I went back. I remember reading those books and I was like, where did this stuff come from? I was like, this is good crap. Like, I don't remember saying this or thinking like, where did this, I couldn't remember. And it's
interesting.
Like, it's the weirdest thing going back and finding these things. You're just like, that was like, somehow that was given to me because that was not something that I just intuitively knew. Right. And I feel like for me, I want to start as a book journey because it's like, I'm searching for these answers. Like the premise of the book is not like, I have all the answers, let me give them to you. It's like, I'm in the season where I'm going through it again. And like, let me share with you what I'm learning on this journey because I'm learning some amazing things. And as I'm sharing these, I'm writing them, again, these insights keep popping in and it's fascinating. So I'll be doing something. And all of a sudden I'm like, I have a doodle. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll run to Dave. I'm like, look at this. He's like, what am I explaining? He's like, I never saw it before. I'm like, neither did I. Like, it showed up when I'm in this like intense, like, time, right? And so it's been fun as I'm writing this because I'm like, these insights are coming at a speed that they don't normally come in.
And I think also like,
it's really fun.
I think, hold that train of thought. I wanted you to keep going on that. But like, I've noticed that as well when it comes to reading books, reading a book and then applying the book. Those are 2 very different things. Like I have read Expert Secrets, .com Secrets, Traffic Secrets, right? And I'm going through, I've not read the hardcover of Expert Secrets. I've only read the softcover. So right now I'm going through and 2 nights ago, I started it, and so like
you started the hardcover.
Yeah, the hardcover. I'm going through like I'm listening to it and I'm reading it and I'm taking notes.
They're way better than the softcovers.
So I'm going through and I'm like all this stuff. But like for the last like 4, 5, 6 months, like all I've been doing, like I have no front end products of my own, right? I'm not building anything. All I'm doing is like working with like big campaigns on the back end, right? So like full out stuff. We're doing stuff with cash flow. We're doing all this stuff. And I'm like going through and I actually voxed you, right? I was like, dude, like people say they've read this book, but they haven't. Like they've read the words, but it's like totally different when you actually experience it and you're like watching where it all fits in and like you start to see how it all clicks together. So it's like that, but from the reverse angle of when you're writing it and trying to put it all in together is like what you're talking about here. Yeah.
It's super fascinating. Anyway, so it's been fun. And I'm excited. So my goal, I'm trying to get it done by summer. For it to be able to launch in March. So the publishing, if you publish traditionally, this publishing schedule is really, really long. So if you guys want to read it in March, I have to have it done by June.
If we want to read it in March of next year, you have to have it done by June this year.
Yeah.
Dang.
So that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm almost done with the first section of the book, and there's 4 sections. In fact, then this month I should be on section number 1, and then that's kind of where I'm at.
Do we get to know what it's called? Like, do you have a title yet?
I do. I don't want to share a title yet because I don't want someone like going and...
Oh, that's true. You guys all sucked. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so everyone buys all the domains up and they start like SEO and me and beating me and all that stuff. But it's gonna be cool. It's a study of like two things. So I'll give you this part. This is a subtitle. So subtitle, this is something Tony Robbins talks a lot about, but it's the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment. Like these two things, right? How do achievers achieve? And then how do you actually get fulfilled? Because it's fascinating. I think I see so much. I see in my own life. Like I achieve something thinking that when I achieve this thing, I'm going to be fulfilled and happy and everything, right? And you achieve the thing and you're like, I'm not happy. And you figure out that achievement and fulfillment are not, they don't work hand in hand. They're two completely, it's a science of achievement, which that's why like science of achievement works good for me. It's like, here's a step-by-step process to get this result, right? I want to be a state champion wrestler. Here's a step-by-step process. Boom, got it. I wanted to be an All-American. Step-by-step process. Got it. I want to start a business. Step-by-step process, like science, right? It's not thinking. It's, you just follow a process and you get it. So for me, achievements always come easy. Like anything I've ever wanted in my life, I've achieved it because there's a science. I figured it out, right? Fulfillment's art. It's different. It's not follow these steps and you become fulfilled.
Right.
It's like, that's the studies. Like, how do you, the yin yang of these two things. And it's like, it's so fascinating. I've been going deeper into it and like seeing the pattern appear over and over and over again, all these different things. And how do you apply it to your life? And like, there's so many cool things in this book that they don't necessarily talk about science of achievement and fulfillment, but they're all in here. Like the pattern's in here over and over and over again. So it's pulling it from all these sources and showing it to everybody is what the book's going to do. And then how to weave it into all the different aspects of your life. Anyway, so that's
one of the things, and I'm sure you'll talk about it, but will be the balance of those two things because it's like early on in my very young career of, being 27 years old, but like it was all about like achieve. And there's always like my mom's voice in the back of my head. It's like, things won't make you happy, right? Like, I'm like, I know, Mom. But yeah, yes, they will, right? And then you get there. And then like, there have been moments in my life where I'm like, I am like right now in this moment, I am completely fulfilled or I'm completely content. And it's just like, I don't know what could make my life better. And it's like not when I achieved anything, it's not when I did anything, but like in that moment, whenever I take a step back and like think about that moment, I have very little drive to go achieve anything more, right? And there's that balance of like, how do I stay like fulfilled and content while also being driven to go achieve, right? Because for me, like, and this is something I've like wrestled with and like talked to Katie about it. And I'm like, it's either one or the other. Like I can't be. And she's like, there's always another option. It's never black and white, right? And so like balancing the two of those and like understanding that, like you said, they don't go hand in hand. They're separate things, I think is really important and something I'm trying to figure out and learn.
Well, I think what people get that's what I got frustrated about. Like all the times I achieve something and I'm so frustrated, like why do I not feel how I thought I was going to feel? And like leads to depression or frustration or whatever. But when you start separating, like these are two different things. And I can achieve and I want to achieve, but how do I get fulfilled in the journey or separately from it? And like when you start, anyway, it's been fascinating. I've been learning so many cool things, and it's gonna be fun to start sharing with everybody. I'm gonna probably start in my podcast, start dropping more and more things. Cause I'm getting deeper and deeper, more of the thoughts are getting flushed out. That's the weird thing about writing a book too, is like, initially I'm like, here's what I'm going to write. And I write an outline of like what the book's going to be. And then I write chapter number 1. And I was like, none of this outline makes sense to me. I write the outline. And then I write chapter 2. And I'm like, and so it's like, it's this rebuild. And by the time it's done, hopefully we'll find out it'll be the perfect thing. That's like, here's the frameworks you need. And like this, for example, this whole concept here, there's a chapter that's going to be taking the frameworks from this book, and this is going to be a chapter walking people through this concept of faith and fear. This doodle is a rough draft. I tell you, I sent this to you today. I'm like, this is not the perfect doodle. That's why I'm not going to post it down below yet, because it's like, this is partially done. It's going to be perfect by the time the book's done. I'm still like thinking through and trying to like get it right, make it in a simple form where like I can understand it, and hopefully that makes it easier for people to apply. But it's anyway, it's pretty cool. I think everyone should write a book. I think everybody listening should set that as a goal, because when you do, just the act of writing the book will change you more than I think anyone will understand. And when someone asks you, like, what are you doing? You're like, I'm writing a book. Like, that just
sounds super cool.
Not much cooler than that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I know you have a hard cutoff, so I want to be respectful of that here. So I want to end with kind of like one question here, and that is specifically about reading books. It's interesting. Like, I'm pretty involved in the ClickFunnels world, right? Like, I mean, those are my people as well too. And so like, those are like the people that follow me and that I interact with and I like talk to a lot. And it's always interesting when I talk to people about reading versus action. And it's like, some people have this like, I feel like this weird thought that like, if you're a reader, you're not an action taker, which I'm like, that's not true. That's not how that works. But anyway, for you, if you are early on in your career, like early on in your journey of, building your business and your funnels and like putting everything together, like, do you recommend like going back and thinking in your life, were you a big reader early on? Like, did you do a lot of reading, or were you more action taking? And like looking back, like, would you recommend people read more, take more action? Like, what's that balance? Cause like, it's very easy. I mean, I know for me, I'm like making time to read, and then that's all I want to do. I'm like, this is amazing, right? And then I'll go take action. Like, this is amazing. And so it's like, what's that balance there? And like, what do you recommend as far as reading versus
Yeah.
Like reading versus action.
It's tough because some people read just because it's like you get fulfillment, or like there's
a good feeling that comes with reading.
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
comes with reading. So
It's a fake sense of accomplishment.
yes. So this is my belief. I remember when I first got started, I was reading a lot, I was listening, I was going to seminars. And I remember at first, it always frustrated me because I was learning all this stuff and I was getting it. I'm like, but I had nowhere to use it. And I was trying to use it all. That's why, like, I can't remember, a couple funnel hacking lives ago I measured. It was like 106 or 116 or something funnels I launched before ClickFunnels. And that's because every idea that came to me, I was like, I have to create something. I like, create this and I create this. I was like creating funnel and coaching program. And like, I joined Dan Kennedy's mastermind, and they talked about you should have a mastermind group. So at the event, I launched a mastermind group. And like, you should have phone sales. So we started phone sales, and like, you should be doing seminars. We launched a seminar. Like every idea that came, I launched it. Right. But man, I got to a point where I was drowning because we had 8,000 things we're doing and nothing really worked. And I remember always feeling guilty because like these ideas are coming to me. Like I'm thinking like these are like gifts from God. These are inspiration. I need to have these things. And it wasn't until I don't remember when, somewhere down the line, I realized that like I don't actually have to take all these different things and do them, but I can understand them because I enjoy like learning and understanding.
Yeah.
So I would take them, and in my mind I'd literally like put them on a shelf. Like, oh, this, like I remember this Dan Kennedy thing on how to do high ticket Air exclusive programs. So I remember listening to it, and it's like there's talking about franchises and this and all this stuff. I was like, this is amazing. So I was taking it because I enjoyed the learning of it. And then I was like, I'm not doing this right now. I'm so stretched thin, but I enjoy the learning. So I'm flying an airplane, listening to this audiobook, whatever. But I'm going to put it over here, and I'm just start categorizing, and I put them over here in my brain. Like, hey, if I ever wanted to go back and do that, I know where it's at. Where things come back, put it over here. So I started like learning because I enjoy learning, but I didn't have to implement everything. And I put things in these different spots, right? At the same time, I had a very clear vision. Like, this is definitive purpose, right? I had a vision. This is what I'm trying to execute on. This is what I'm trying to do. So as I'm learning, when something came that crossed my mind, or was like, oh, that's the next step, I could grab it and plug it in and I could use it.
Yep.
If it didn't, I'm like, that's awesome. I'm right here. Someday I'm going to use that in the future, right? And I talked to this, James Furlong, I talked about this because he has a Trello board. He calls this Shiny Penny Trello board. Where like anytime you have a great idea, like
yeah, I have one of those.
Instead of like trying to implement, he's like, I put it over in these Trello boards, like future ideas. That way, it's like, because for me, I think for most entrepreneurs, every idea is like your baby. Like, this is the greatest idea of all time.
Yeah, I have a Trello board called Josh's Brain.
Oh, awesome. So I did that. This is pre-Trello, so I remember getting a note card. I had the 3x5 note cards and the little thing, and so when I had the ideas, I put them in there. I put it there, right? And like someday I'm gonna come back to this, and I get ideas and I put them there. I kept putting them there, either in a note card or something somewhere else. And it's crazy now. I fast forward. Man, I think it's 19 or 20 years I've been doing this now. So whatever it is, almost 2 decades. And it's really cool because when I coach people now, and this is my inner circle room, so I have people in here, I'm coaching them, and someone will be up here on stage and they're stuck with a problem and they're frustrated, like, I don't know how to do this thing. And all of a sudden, out of the back of my mind pops up this thing and it comes in and I'm like, I have this thing, I'm like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? It's because I learned it. Because like I read this book over here, I saw this thing over here, and like all these things. And so I think a lot of times we have to understand that like learning is fun. So enjoy it. Don't be like, I'm not going to read because I don't like,
right.
Reading's awesome. Read, learn, do those things. But also understand like you need to have like what is your mission? Stephen Larson talked about this at 2 Funnel Hacking Lives ago. Like he called it just-in-time learning. Like, and so he's like, only read the book that you need, which I kind of agree with that, except for like, this is a better pastime than watching movies, right? So like, let's read, let's study, right?
Yeah.
But having your path, like this is my goal, this is where I'm going to go. Like if you join my coaching program, like we're going to talk about what's first funnel. That's one thing you focus on. Don't do anything else. Like just focus on that.
Yep.
You can learn other things, but categorize them away till you're ready. And then as you get pieces, they're like, I need that. And like figuring out the next steps. I think that's kind of how I would do the yin yang of both of those. Cause I'm the same way. Like I'm learning so many things that, or studying things, or I find things that are awesome that I'm not going to use, but like someday there's gonna be someone I come upon that nugget is going to be like the thing that unlocks something for them, and they're going to be super grateful someday.
Yeah.
So
anyway. All right. Well, man, thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. This is so much fun. We could talk for hours, but we do have to wrap it up there. We've got a little something to get to. So thank you, man. I appreciate it.
No worries. And hopefully for all you guys, 2 things I want to say. Number 1, I'd highly recommend reading this book. And read it through the lens of this. Like I wish the first time I didn't know where it was going, so I was all over the place and just like freaking out. But look at the lens of faith and fear. Of like, I don't want to be a drifter. I want to be someone who's spiritually, mentally, and physically free, right? Look at that and start looking at everything he talks about from this lens, and just look at it as like protections of either how to get to the spot where you're going 2%, or how to keep yourself from becoming a drifter, or if you are a drifter, how to shift yourself back. And like looking at this, because it's like this guidebook of all the ways that the devil uses to shift you around. And when you're aware of it, man, it makes it so much more powerful.
And like,
awareness is huge.
The thing that I would say, we didn't have time to get to it, but like the thing I would say too is like, understand that it's not, like if you're religious, understand that there's probably going to be some things that like when he taught, like the devil's like, you don't need God, you don't need me. You can, like, some of the things that are going to be in there, like Russell said, like 97% is good, 3% is bad. Like, don't let that prevent you from understanding the value and the power that's in this book, because there is so much good stuff in this. And like any single time that I've ever had success at anything, when I look back, it follows very closely to the principles that we're taught in here. So
yeah,
anyway,
that's awesome. And then wait till next March to buy my book.
And I will be the #1 affiliate. So hopefully you all can be number 2, 3, 4. That's cool. But it's going to be super, super cool. So Russell, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. We'll have to do it again for the Book of Mormon or something like that. And
that'd be fun.
Yeah, all right. All right, guys, that's it. As always, hustle, hustle. God bless. Don't be afraid to think different, because those of us that think different are going to be the ones to change the world. I love you all. See you soon.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.